Welcome back, Lincoln currency. Imagine holding in your hand a tiny piece of American history just 19 millimeters across and weighing a modest 3.11 grams. Its face instantly recognizable to almost anyone in the United States, or even to collectors around the world. The profile of Abraham Lincoln gazes rightward, dignified yet humble. The details in his hair and beard tell a story of fine engraving that has lasted for generations, and right beside him the date 1978 is clearly struck, a frozen marker in time below that date. Depending on where it was made, there may be a tiny letter AD for Denver or an S for San Francisco, and if there is no letter at all, it came from the great Philadelphia Mint. In the millions and millions and millions of these coins that rolled off the presses in that year, most are worn down a little by decades of pockets, purses, vending machines, and countless small transactions, but in some cases a coin can still gleam with its original coppery red luster, almost as bright as the day it was struck. And for those coins, collectors pay attention because condition is everything. The metal itself in a 1978 cent is old school copper alloy, 95% copper with the rest a mix of tin and zinc, giving it a warm tone and that familiar ringing sound if you let it drop onto a hard surface, a sound modern zinc pennies lack. If you look closely at the obverse side, the one with Lincoln, you might notice tiny raised letters VDB. Those initials stand for Victor David Brenner, the artist who first designed the Lincoln cent in 1909 in honor of the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. That design persisted for decades, but in 1959 the reverse was changed from wheat ears to the Lincoln Memorial Building, and that reverse stayed until 2009, when a special bicentennial series marked the end of the memorial design. So in 1978 we are in the heart of the memorial cent era. The reverse shows Frank Gasparo's depiction of the Lincoln Memorial, complete with the tiniest engraved statue of Lincoln visible inside. If you have sharp eyes or a magnifying glass above the memorial, you'll see the words United States of America, and just below that in smaller letters E pluribus unum, the Latin phrase meaning out of many one, and then anchoring the bottom in bold capitals is 1 cent, the coin's face value. Yet the irony is that the copper inside the coin has been worth more than 1 cent for years, though laws prohibit melting them down for scrap in circulated condition. Nearly every 1978 penny is still worth only a cent, maybe 2 or 3 cents in melt value terms, but to the collector market the story changes drastically. For coins that have been preserved with exceptional care, a coin graded MS65 red, for example, might bring in several dollars, and at MS67 red it can jump into the hundreds of dollars. In extremely rare cases, an almost perfect specimen can fetch thousands, and it's these standout survivors among billions that fueled the thrill of the hunt. In 1978 the United States Mint produced staggering numbers of these coins. Philadelphia made over $5.5 billion, Denver over $4.2 billion, and San Francisco struck nearly $300 million, mostly as proof coins. For collectors, that scale means it's one of the most common dates in the entire Lincoln Memorial series, but despite the huge mintage, small variations in strike quality, planchet flaws, and die conditions create subtle differences between coins. For example, a freshly struck proof coin from San Francisco will have mirror-like fields and frosted design elements, creating a dramatic contrast that proof collectors cherish, and those proof coins, if perfectly preserved in their original packaging, can be worth $20 or more today, not because of rarity in the strict sense, but because of the demand for pristine examples. Even more exciting to some collectors are mint errors, a double die obverse where the date or letters appear doubled, a clipped planchet where a piece of the coin's edge is missing, a misaligned die where the design is slightly off-center, or even off-metal strikes. Though rare in 1978, each of these errors can transform a penny into a miniature jackpot, fetching $50, $100, or even several $100s depending on the severity. And I appeal, the story of the 1978 cent is not just about numbers and values, though it's about its place in American culture. By the late 1970s, inflation was changing the buying power of a cent dramatically. Things that once cost a penny decades earlier now cost a nickel, a dime, or more, yet the penny remained a staple in daily transactions. It was the coin you got as change from vending machines, the coin you might throw into a fountain while making a wish, or the one that collected in a jar on the kitchen counter to be rolled and taken to the bank for a few extra dollars. The copper cent was still the workhorse of small change, but only a Few years later in 1982 the mint would change the composition to copper-plated zinc to save on rising metal costs, making the 1978 cent one of the last high mintage all-copper issues. Every time you hold a 1978 cent you are holding that last chapter of an era before the zinc years began. In the collector world the concept of red, brown, and brown grades matters a lot. Red means 85% or more of the original mint red color remains. Red-brown means between 15 and 85%, and brown means less than 15% of the original red tone remains. Since copper naturally darkens over time, finding a fully red 1978 cent in circulation today is uncommon, and finding one in a grade above MS66 is downright rare. This is why slab-certified coins in those grades attract attention and higher prices. Think about the journey of a single 1978 penny from minting to today, struck at high speed between steel dies, ejected into massive bins, counted, bagged, shipped to banks, handed out by cashiers. It might have traveled across states, sat in cash registers, been used for gum, candy, bus fare, laundry machines. Over years it might have been lost in couch cushions, dropped on sidewalks, fished from change jars, and somewhere along the way most of that mint luster would have worn away. But a few coins avoided all that, perhaps set aside right from a mint roll, kept in a safe drawer, or sealed in a mint set. These are the coins that now emerge decades later, untouched and near perfect. When one of those coins appears at auction, collectors and dealers know it's special. They bid fiercely, driving up the price and occasionally setting record sales. And this is where that wild figure of $555 million comes into play. While a single 1978 penny will never be worth such a staggering sum, if you add up the total collector market value of every high-grade example, every proof, every error coin, every unsearched roll and jar in the country, you could imagine a vast theoretical fortune of staggering proportions, not in actual spendable terms, but as a reflection of just how much value collectors collectively assign to these little copper discs. Even with billions minted and billions surviving, the stories embedded in each coin make them far more than just spare change. They are history lessons, art pieces, tiny metal ambassadors from a very specific moment in time. Alright, let's roll right into part 2, keeping the exact same style, no headings, no captions, no subtitles, just a continuous stream of narrative that you could read in one go for your YouTube video. So we pick up where part 1 left off and dive deeper into every angle of the 1978 1-cent coin, the details, the history, the market quirks, the collector psychology, and the imaginative scale of its total worth. So imagine now the moment in early 1978 when the US Mint prepared its presses for another massive year of penny production. The minting facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco were all running their schedules with tight precision. Dies had to be cut with immaculate care, the master hubs polished to perfection, and every working die examined to ensure the fine lines in Lincoln's hair and the subtle columns of the memorial would transfer clearly onto the planchets. The copper alloy planchets themselves were prepared in vast industrial processes, sheets of copper alloy rolled to precise thickness, punched into round blanks, and run through upset mills to form the raised rims. These blanks were then clean polished and ready for the striking chamber. The dies would strike them at enormous pressure in fractions of a second, leaving behind the crisp relief of Lincoln's bust on one side and the memorial on the other, and in that instant a new 1978 penny was born, ready to enter the endless circulation of American commerce. To the average person in 1978 this coin was utterly ordinary. It was simply the change in your pocket. Perhaps you might use it to help pay for a candy bar that cost 15 cents, or add it to the fare for a city bus, or slip it into a gumball machine. The coin might sit in your dresser drawer mixed with nickels and dimes unnoticed, but to a collector even then certain 1978 cents stood out. Perhaps a proof coin with a deep mirror finish and frosted devices sitting in its mint-issued hard plastic case from San Francisco. Perhaps an unusually sharp strike from Philadelphia showing every line in Lincoln's coat, and a pristine bright red surface. These were coins to be noticed and stored away. But 1978 was also a year without any major recognized varieties in the Lincoln cent series. No famous double dies like 1955, no off-metal mint errors that became legendary. Yet that doesn't mean there weren't errors, it just means most of them were small and individual, each one a potential prize for the right finder. A coin struck slightly off-center with a crescent of blank planchet showing a coin with a filled die where part of a letter is missing from the design, a broad strike where the rim is expanded and the design looks slightly stretched. These errors become tiny windows into the manufacturing realities of the US Mint, and for collectors they add spice to an otherwise common date. When you consider the weight of all the 1978 pennies ever struck, you start to see the scale. Each coin at 3.11 grams means a billion of them weigh over 3 million kilograms, more than 3,000 metric tons, so the total mintage of over 10 billion pennies from that year amounts to over 30,000 metric tons of copper alloys spread out in circulation across the country and the world, in people's pockets, drawers, vending machines, and even buried in the ground, and yet each one is a miniature piece of art. Lincoln's portrait has endured on the cent for over a century, in part because of its balance of artistry and symbolism. Victor David Brenner's original design captured Lincoln's thoughtful gaze and distinctive features, and by 1978 it had become a fixture of American coinage. The memorial reverse by Frank Gasparo is equally symbolic, showing not just a building but a tribute to Lincoln's enduring legacy, a building that itself houses a larger-than-life statue of the man commemorated on the coin. If you take a high-grade 1978 penny under magnification, you can see details that the naked eye misses: the fine lines of the memorial steps, the separation of the columns, the tiniest representation of Lincoln's seated statue inside. Even the lettering on the coin has subtle character: the sharp squared edges of the letters on a fresh strike, the tiny imperfections from the die-making process that make each coin just a little different from the next. And when collectors talk about red, brown, and brown, they're really talking about the way copper reacts with air over time. Copper naturally oxidizes, forming a duller, darker surface, so a coin that still has its bright orange-red mint color after decades is a special survivor-proof. Coins tend to keep this color longer because they are stored carefully from day one, but even a business strike from a mint roll, if kept sealed and untouched, can remain blazing red for decades, and that's the kind of coin that can climb in value exponentially with the right grade. By 1978, coin grading was becoming increasingly professionalized. The major third-party grading services like PCGS and NGC would be founded just a few years later, and they would eventually create a standardized market for coins like these in high grades. Today, a PCGS MS67 RD 1978 penny is a trophy piece for a memorial cent collector worth thousands because it represents the absolute top end of what survives from that massive mintage. And when you hear about a coin like that selling for over $4,000 at auction, it makes you realize that rarity isn't always about the number minted. Sometimes it's about the number that survive in a specific condition. Multiply that by all the proof coins in perfect deep cameo, all the high-end mint state reds, and all the dramatic mint errors from that year, and you can start to see how the imaginative figure of $555 million comes into play, not as the value of a single coin but as the cumulative symbolic market value of the best combined. It's a way of thinking about these pennies not as throwaway change but as a massive field in which a few gems are hidden, and those gems are worth serious money to the right people. For the rest of us, the 1978 penny is still a nostalgic object. Maybe you remember being a kid and getting them in change and being told to put the shiny ones in a jar. Maybe you remember using them to scratch off lottery tickets or sticking them in pressed penny machines at amusement parks. Maybe you still have one from the year you were born tucked into an envelope by a parent or grandparent. These little coins can carry personal value far beyond their monetary worth. In 1978, no one imagined the penny would one day be endangered by economic forces, yet by the 21st century the cost to make a penny had risen above 1 cent, making them a net loss for the mint. Discussions began about eliminating the penny altogether. Canada did it in 2013, and if the United States follows suit, coins like the 1978 cent will become relics of a retired denomination. They will no longer be just small change, they will be artifacts of how commerce once worked, and for collectors that kind of historical shift adds another layer of appeal because it turns something common into something finite, and when something becomes finite, the best preserved examples take on even greater importance. Now imagine again the sheer quantity minted: more than 10 billion coins, and picture them spread across the country in pockets, jars, vending machines, laundromats, parking meters, and over the decades many are lost, discarded, corroded in soil, or worn to the point where design details vanish, but others survive almost untouched, and those survivors carry the potential for discovery. At any moment you might get a 1978 penny and change at a store and notice it's unusually bright. Maybe you check the mint mark, maybe you compare it to pictures online, maybe you realize it could be worth more than a cent. That's the thrill collectors talk about, the treasure hunt in your own Change the idea that the next handful of coins could contain something special, and for the 1978 penny that possibility remains alive even now decades later when you think about its design history, the artistry of Brenner and Gasparo, the copper composition, the massive mintage, the rarity of high grades and errors, and the cultural nostalgia. It's easy to see why it holds a place in numismatic hearts, and when you scale up from a single coin to the imagined combined value of the choicest survivors reaching that poetic $555 million mark, you realize this isn't just about a piece of metal, it's about the story's value and human connection we attach to it. Alright, let's keep flowing right into part 3, keeping the same voice, same uninterrupted style, no captions, no subtitles, no headings, just one long unfolding narrative for your YouTube script. So we push deeper into the layers of the 1978 penny, its life, its market, its physicality, its hidden gems, and the enormous imagined value of the best examples combined into that vast figure. The story continues with the day a single 1978 penny leaves the mint fresh from the press. It is scooped into a bin. Along with thousands of its identical siblings, the bin is tilted, and the coins slide into counting machines, then into large canvas bags. These bags might be labeled with their destination: bank vaults, armored trucks, and eventually the retail counters, where they will begin their journey through countless hands. For most of these coins, the journey will be short before their new copper red brilliance dulls from contact with skin, fabric, and air. Copper is a reactive metal, and even the clean oils from fingertips can leave faint marks that grow darker over time. Yet, in those first days after minting, the luster is vivid under a bright light. The surface almost sparkles as if the grain of the metal itself is alive, and turning that early sparkle into a decades-long treasure requires avoidance of the one thing: coins are designed for circulation, so a few rolls fresh from the mint are taken by collectors and tucked away still in their paper wrappers, perhaps labeled 1978p or 1978d. Those rolls sit untouched in drawers or safe deposit boxes while the rest of the mintage gets spent, worn, and battered by the flow of commerce. The Philadelphia Mint's coins carry no mint mark and are most numerous, over 5.5 billion. Struck the Denver coins marked with a small d, total over 4.2 billion, and then there are the San Francisco proofs, the smallest mintage, but not meant for circulation. These are sold to collectors in special sets. The proof coins of 1978 are especially interesting. Each one struck multiple times by specially prepared dies to bring out razor-sharp details and mirror fields. Proof pennies have an almost unreal look to them, the flat areas so reflective they can catch a clear image like a tiny copper mirror, and the raised details frosted to a lighter tone, giving them contrast. These proof coins, if left sealed in their hard plastic cases from the U.S. Mint, can still be found in deep cameo condition, a term meaning that both sides have strong contrast between the frosted designs and the mirrored background. Proof collectors value this highly, and the best examples with perfect surfaces can sell for many times the original cost of the proof set. But proof coins aren't the only special finds in the 1978 cent world. Errors can elevate an ordinary date to an extraordinary piece. An off-center strike that leaves a blank crescent of metal can be worth dozens or hundreds of times face value. A doubled die where lettering or the date shows doubling from a misaligned die transfer can command even more if it's dramatic enough. Die cracks, cuts, missing letters, planchet flaws. Each of these quirks is like a fingerprint in metal, evidence of the minting process gone slightly awry. To a casual spender, such coins are curiosities, maybe worth keeping, but to a dedicated collector they are numismatic trophies. The grading of a 1978 cent plays a massive role in its market value. Coins are graded on a 70-point scale where circulated grades fall below 60 and mint state. Coins range from MS-60 to MS-70. The difference between MS-65 and MS-67 can be subtle to the untrained eye, but huge in value to collectors. An MS-65 red might be worth a few dollars, an MS-67 red could be worth hundreds, and an MS-68 red in this date is so rare it might reach into the thousands. In fact, the single finest graded example known, a 1978 penny in MS-68 red, is valued around $7,750. This for a coin with a face value of 1 cent. The jump in value is not about rarity of date, but rarity of perfection condition. Rarity is a powerful force in numismatics because while billions of coins were made, almost none survive in flawless form after decades. When you multiply that rarity by the number of serious collectors seeking the very best, the price can climb quickly. Auction records tell the story. A 1978 penny graded MS-67 plus red selling for over $4,200 at heritage auctions is an example of how demand meets scarcity and creates a price Far beyond face value, think of it as a pyramid. The base is billions of coins in circulated condition worth face value, above that a smaller tier of uncirculated coins, above that a thin layer of high-grade mint state reds, and at the very top just a handful of coins nearly perfect, and each step up the pyramid multiplies the value. If we imagined every collector quality coin from 1978 combined into one giant portfolio, the total could indeed approach a fantastic figure, hundreds of millions in aggregate, not in the sense that any single coin is worth such a sum, but in the sense that the entire market for them at the highest levels represents that much capital, and that is where the $555 million figure works as a symbolic total. It is a way to convey the scale of this hidden value across millions of coin albums, rolls, slabs, and proof cases scattered among collectors worldwide. Beyond the money, the 1978 cent also marks a historical moment in coinage composition. Only 4 years later, in 1982, the US Mint would transition to copper-plated zinc planchets, reducing the weight from 3.11 grams to 2.5 grams to save on material costs. The rising price of copper had made the old alloy too expensive to continue in mass circulation, so the 1978 penny stands among the last large runs of the classic copper composition. That changeover in the early 80s means the older copper cents now have an intrinsic metal value above face value, though melting them remains illegal by law, so they circulate side by side with their lighter zinc successors, to most people indistinguishable, until weighed or compared side by side in your hand. The copper coin feels slightly heavier, more substantial. In a jar of mixed pennies, the older copper ones stand out for their tone and weight. Many collectors still pull them out to save, even if they're common dates, simply for their composition. Among these, the 1978 issue is plentiful, but has its fans both for birth-year collections and for those building complete runs of memorial cents. Some collectors pursue complete sets by mint mark in the highest grades they can afford. In that quest, the 1978D and 1978P and MS67 red become key targets, not because they are rare in lower grades, but because they are extremely difficult to find so high up the scale. San Francisco proofs, meanwhile, are collected both as part of proof sets and individually slabbed and graded for their cameo quality. When you examine one of these coins, even through a plastic holder, the craftsmanship is evident. The sharpness of Lincoln's portrait, the clarity of the memorial, the evenness of the strike, all mark it as something apart from the billions of business strikes, and in the mind of a collector these are little copper masterpieces preserving a moment in the history of the mint. If you close your eyes and imagine the combined sound of billions of pennies striking against each other in mint bags and coin counters and cash drawers, you can almost hear the roar of commerce. In 1978, when cash transactions dominated daily life before debit cards and online payments, the penny was still in heavy use. In fact, many vending machines of the time took pennies for incremental amounts alongside nickels, dimes, and quarters. It was a real tool of trade, and its design was part of the visual language of American money, and so the 1978 cent is more than just copper and numbers. It is a survivor from that tactile era, and every high-grade example is a pristine little relic of it. Continuing without pause into Part 4, keeping the stream of language smooth and unbroken, no headings, no captions, no subtitles, just the ongoing unfolding of the 1978 1-cent story. We go deeper into the way this humble coin interacts with human hands, markets, and history. Picture for a moment the role of the penny in 1978 daily life. You might wake up with coins from the day before sitting on the nightstand, perhaps a quarter, 2 dimes, and 3 pennies among them. One of those pennies bears the date 1978, its surface already dulled from years of use, or maybe still bright if it has only just entered circulation. You pick it up without thought, slide it into your pocket. Later at the corner store, you hand over coins to pay for a newspaper or a pack of gum. The clerk counts out change, and that 1978 penny leaves your life to enter someone else's. For the vast majority of people, each coin is just a unit of exchange, yet unseen to them is the immense numismatic infrastructure beneath every transaction, a network of collectors, dealers, grading services, auction houses, and reference books, all of whom ascribe meaning to certain examples of this otherwise ordinary cent. Now think about the mechanics of grading this coin under the exacting lights of a grading room. A professional numismatist examines a 1978 penny through a 5x magnifier, rotating it slowly to catch the cartwheel luster, the radial shimmer that runs across the surface of a true mint state coin. They note the strike sharpness, The absence or presence of bag marks, tiny nicks caused when coins collide in mint bags. They grade the coin by weighing these factors against the standards established over decades. For an MS-67 red coin, there must be blazing original color, no distracting marks, full strike on both obverse and reverse, and that intangible eye appeal that separates a great coin from a merely good one. The tiniest flaw, a faint tick on Lincoln's cheek, a minute mark in the field, can be the difference between a $30 coin and a $3,000 coin, and that difference is why serious collectors send coins for certification and encapsulation. The grading company seals the coin in a tamper-proof holder with a label stating its grade, date, mint mark, and other attributes like red, brown, or brown for copper coins. In the 1978 series, the MS-67 red grade is already rare, MS-67 Plus even rarer, and MS-68 is the pinnacle, so far only one known at that top grade. This scarcity of condition is the true driver of market value, and it creates a hierarchy among billions of coins where only a handful reach the summit at auction. The drama of this scarcity plays out. Imagine a listing for a 1978 penny MS-67 Plus red. The opening bid is a few $100s. Quickly, two bidders drive it to $1,000, then $2,500. As the end approaches, the increments slow, each click adding another $100 until finally the hammer falls at $4,259 for a 1-cent coin. To outsiders this seems absurd, but to those who understand the market it is simply the meeting point of rarity and demand. This is why the idea of a combined total market of $555 million for the best 1978 cents is not so far-fetched when you tally every top-grade business strike, every deep cameo proof, every spectacular error, and every roll of untouched mint coins spread across collectors worldwide. You begin to see the scale. It's a market measured in both money and passion. Another dimension to consider is the role of the 1978 cent in type collecting. A type collector seeks one example of each major design and composition change in a series. The memorial reverse copper cents of 1959 to 1982 form one such type, and within that group the 1978 coin is as representative as any. Yet some collectors choose it specifically as their type coin because it falls near the end of the copper era but is still common enough to find in pristine condition with patience. For them, the 1978 penny becomes the face of an entire era, and securing the best example they can find is a personal goal. Errors from 1978 also find their way into specialized era collections. Some collectors focus entirely on off-center strikes, others on broad strikes, double strikes, or even unusual die clashes where elements from one side of the coin appear faintly on the other. From this year, a dramatic off-center with full date visible could sell for $100 or more. A double strike where Lincoln's head appears twice in overlapping images could fetch even higher amounts. The more dramatic the error, the greater its appeal, not just for value but for the fascination of holding a piece of the minting process gone wrong and preserved for decades in copper. The physical feel of a copper cent also plays into its nostalgia. Pick up a 1978 penny and then a modern zinc penny. Close your eyes and weigh them in your hand. The older coin feels more solid. The sound when dropped onto a hard surface is different, brighter, more resonant. For some collectors this sensory difference is reason enough to set aside all copper cents regardless of date and build hoards of them. These hoards are often stored in 5-gallon buckets, coffee cans, or bank boxes, quietly accumulating weight and metal value in case laws change and melting becomes legal someday. Such a scenario could transform common date copper cents into bullion items valued for their metal content. The 1978 issue would be swept up in that tidal shift overnight, gaining a base value far above face, even if not for numismatic reasons, but as things stand its extra value above 1 cent is almost entirely dependent on condition and collector demand. In circulated condition with heavy wear, the coin is worth 1 cent in mint state red, brown maybe $2 or $3 in mint state red, at MS-65 $10 to $20 at MS-67 red, hundreds, and at MS-67 plus or MS-68 red, thousands. Each step up represents a huge contraction in surviving population, from billions down to hundreds, down to dozens, and finally to single digits. This funnel effect is the same across many modern issues, but the massive original mintage of the 1978 penny makes its top survivors even more impressive because they have beaten astronomical odds to remain flawless through minting, packaging, and decades of storage. In the broader history of the Lincoln cent, the year 1978 sits quietly between the bicentennial excitement of the mid-70s and the composition change of the early 80s, yet in that quiet lies stability. The Mint was refining its processes. Proof coins were consistently high quality. Business strikes were abundant, and the design was familiar to the public. This stability means the 1978 penny is a perfect representation of its time, a workhorse coin produced in vast numbers to meet the needs of a cash-based economy. In the numismatic literature of the future, historians may note it as one of the last years before the push toward reducing copper usage became unstoppable, and for collectors assembling date runs from 1959 to 1982. It will always have its place alongside its siblings. For now, it remains a coin that could appear in your pocket change at any moment. A tiny possibility that the cent you receive could be a blazing gem worth hundreds or thousands is what keeps the hunt alive, and that is the magic of coins like this. They turn the mundane into the potentially extraordinary without warning. Rolling right into Part 5, keeping the same flowing, uninterrupted tone. No headings, no captions, no subtitles, just the narrative continuing to expand and deepen the world of the 1978 1-cent coin and its strange journey from ordinary currency to potential collector's treasure. Imagine it is a summer afternoon decades after 1978. You're sitting at a kitchen table with a coffee can of loose change. The coins clink and rattle as you pour them out into a shallow pile on the table. The smell of metal, a faint tang of copper and nickel rises as you begin to sort. Without thinking, you push the pennies into one pile and the rest into another. Somewhere in that pile is a coin that has seen more years than you can count. A 1978 penny, dull brown with only traces of its once bright surface. Or perhaps there's one that catches the light, still red with luster, that makes you pause and look closer. Maybe you hold it up between thumb and forefinger and slowly rotate it under the light, watching that cartwheel effect sweep across Lincoln's cheek and the field around him, and in that moment you feel a tiny thrill because you know not every coin from that year looks like this. It is this act of searching, this treasure hunt, that fuels a big part of the coin hobby. People take rolls of pennies from the bank, 50 cents at a time, or entire boxes, $25 in pennies, and spend hours searching through them for the gems, those elusive coins that somehow escaped the wear of circulation for decades. Some search for wheat cents from before 1959, others for errors, but for those focused on memorial cents, the years from the late 70s are prime territory for finding solid red examples that still look like they came straight from the mint. The 1978 cent in particular appeals to those who like copper composition coins because it sits just a few years before the switch to zinc and was produced in enormous quantities, meaning there's a decent chance of finding one, yet the odds of finding an MS-67 red in the wild are vanishingly small. Most coins have at least some contact marks or fading of color. Still, the thrill comes from possibility, and sometimes those possibilities pay off. Picture someone pulling a roll from the bank in the present day, opening it to find not just a few shiny 1978 coins, but one with no visible marks, blazing red color, full strike on the memorial. They send it to a grading service, and weeks later get the news: MS-67 red. Suddenly that coin is worth several $100s, maybe more. Depending on market demand, that's the leap from face value to serious money, and it all starts with the willingness to look beyond the obvious. To understand why that leap exists, you have to consider the nature of copper as a coinage metal. Copper reacts to its environment quickly. Fingerprints, air, humidity all change its surface color and texture over time. In fact, even coins kept in rolls can tone unevenly if the paper or environment isn't perfectly stable. This means that the population of top grade survivors shrinks every year. Coins are mishandled, stored poorly, or simply overlooked until their surfaces change forever. This shrinking supply in high grade, while the date remains common in low grades, creates a divergence in value that grows sharper with time. The longer we are from 1978, the more dramatic that divergence will become, because the coin is no longer being made. Every gem that's lost now cannot be replaced, and that is part of what drives collectors to seek them out while they still can. Another layer to the 1978 cents appeal is its place in sentimental collecting. Many people like to own coins from their birth year or from significant years in their lives. For someone born in 1978, a pristine penny from that year can be a small personal time capsule. For someone who graduated high school that year or got married or had a child, the coin can carry a memory as much as it carries value. This emotional connection adds another invisible layer to the market, because some coins, once purchased, will never return to circulation or be sold again. They stay in albums or cases as keepsakes, further reducing the pool available for trade. When you begin to think about the combined market for these coins in such personal terms, you can start to see how the $555 million aggregate value idea becomes more than just an abstract number. Each high-grade coin taken off the market increases the Scarcity for those still seeking one each proof coin locked in a family collection means fewer to buy for the next generation of collectors, and over decades this slow tightening of supply pushes prices upward beyond the high-grade business strikes and proofs. The world of 1978 penny errors is a whole niche of its own. Off-center strikes that show half a blank planchet are dramatic and immediately eye-catching. A misaligned die can leave part of the design creeping toward the rim, creating a skewed look. Sometimes coins are struck on foreign planchets meant for other denominations or even other countries, leading to weight differences and color variations that can stump a casual observer but delight an error specialist. These oddities stand out all the more because they contrast with the uniform precision of billions of correctly struck coins in circulation. The reverse design of the 1978 cent with its memorial building is itself an interesting study. The design includes tiny details that many never notice, such as the depiction of Lincoln's statue inside the memorial visible between the central columns on a sharp strike. Under magnification you can even see hints of the statue's outline for proof coins. This detail is razor crisp for business strikes. It depends heavily on die condition and strike quality. A fresh die can show these micro details clearly, but as dies wear through use the lines soften and fine elements disappear entirely. This is one of the subtle ways collectors differentiate between ordinary coins and those struck under optimal conditions. The obverse too holds secrets beyond the obvious portrait. The designer's initials VDB rest discreetly on the shoulder line. Lincoln's hair shows individual strands on a sharp strike, and the lettering, especially in Liberty and In God We Trust, can reveal how well the coin was made. Doubled letters or distortion can hint at die wear or misalignment. Each of these micro-observations adds another dimension for the collector who is willing to look closely. The mint set coins from 1978 also deserve attention. These sets, packaged by the mint, contain one coin of each denomination from each operating mint that year. The cents in these sets often have better than average strikes and luster because they were not released into general circulation. They were handled less and stored more carefully, though not to proof standards for collectors building high-grade sets. The mint set cents are a reliable source of candidates for grading, and sometimes they produce coins that reach the MS-67 red level. Their sealed packaging from the era is also a nostalgic artifact on its own, often with the mint's branding and a simple slip of paper describing the coins inside. Yet even mint-set coins are not immune to time. The plastic can tone the coins, the environment can cause spotting, so even here the survival of perfect coins is a game of numbers and chance. The longer you immerse yourself in the 1978 pennies world, the more you realize it is a microcosm of coin collecting itself, a vast sea of common examples with a few rare treasures scattered throughout, a blend of history, art, industry, and chance, all wrapped into a single small disc of metal. And when you step back and imagine the collective value of every treasured piece from this date in the hands of collectors, dealers, and institutions, the idea of it adding up to hundreds of millions becomes less fanciful and more like a reflection of how deeply people care about preserving and owning a piece of that history. Continuing seamlessly into Part 6, keeping the language as one uninterrupted narrative with no headings, no captions, no subtitles, just the ongoing expansion of the 1978 1-cent coin story and deepening into the layers of economics, production, and collector fascination. In 1978, the United States Mint was operating under a set of financial realities that most members of the public never thought about. Each coin had to be produced at a cost low enough to make sense for circulation, yet the rising price of copper in the late 1970s was beginning to pressure the economics of the cent. Since the coin was composed of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, its intrinsic metal value rose and fell with commodity markets. When copper prices climbed, the actual melt value of the coin approached and sometimes exceeded 1 cent, sparking discussions inside the mint and the treasury about alternative compositions. This was not a sudden conversation, but rather a continuation of periodic reviews of coinage costs going back decades. By 1978, however, the writing was on the wall that the traditional copper cent might be nearing its end. As an economically sustainable choice, the mint continued to produce the coin in massive quantities, billions per year, but behind-the-scenes experiments were underway with alternative metals and compositions. These included test strikes in aluminum and copper-plated zinc planchets. The latter would eventually become the standard in 1982. What makes the 1978 copper Cent special in hindsight is that it represents one of the final high mintage years before the switch. The entire infrastructure of blank production, striking quality control and distribution for copper cents would be altered in just a few years, but in 1978 the process was still entirely built around copper planchets supplied in huge lots from contracted producers, blank discs of metal arriving at the mint to be fed into high-speed presses, each coin struck at hundreds of blows per minute, ejected into bins and ultimately bagged in bulk. The act of producing billions of cents without major interruption or shortage was a testament to industrial scale and efficiency, and yet within those billions tiny variations were occurring every second. Slight differences in die pressure, planchet quality, die wear, and press timing created coins that were technically the same denomination, same design, same date, but subtly different in sharpness, surface, and appeal. When we talk about the most valuable 1978 pennies, we are talking about the statistical outliers that emerged from this process, near perfect examples that by chance and circumstance survived untouched and unblemished until today. There's also the cultural layer to consider. In 1978, pennies were still a meaningful unit in daily transactions. Vending machines often accepted them. Public telephones could still be operated for coins. Cash registers still rang up prices that ended in 99 cents with the understanding that a penny or two would pass between customer and cashier. The coin was embedded in the rhythm of commerce and social exchange. This everyday ubiquity is what makes the survival of pristine coins so improbable, because each one had to avoid countless chances to be spent, dropped, scratched, or corroded. Even proof coins, while better protected, could be mishandled or stored in ways that allowed spotting or toning. The few that avoided these fates become the elite class of the date, commanding prices far above face and serving as cornerstones for registry sets in the grading competition. World registry sets allow collectors to assemble the finest possible collection of a given series, and date combination points are awarded based on the grade of each coin and the rarity of that grade. This creates a competitive marketplace where owning the single finest known example of a 1978 penny can be a matter of prestige as much as value, and prestige often translates directly into higher auction prices. The dynamic is not unlike that in the art market, where a painting might be worth more not just for its intrinsic qualities but for its uniqueness and the status it confers on its owner. A perfect MS68 red 1978 penny is like owning the only surviving original of a particular masterpiece. It is a one-of-one status symbol in copper. When the hammer falls at auction and the coin sells for an eye-watering sum, the news spreads quickly among collectors, sometimes even reaching mainstream media outlets, which then sparks a new wave of interest among casual searchers and treasure hunters who dig through jars of change in hopes of striking it rich. Even though the odds are long, the potential reward is enough to keep the hunt alive, and that hunt feeds back into the market as more coins are submitted for grading, increasing the population data and refining our understanding of just how rare the top grades are. The economic forces behind the coin's value today are not just about rarity but also about liquidity. The 1978 penny in top grades has an established market, meaning that if you own one, there are known venues and eager buyers ready to transact quickly. Major auction houses, online platforms, and private dealers create a constant cycle of buying and selling, and with each high-profile sale, the perceived value and desirability of the coin are reinforced. In the long view, the future value of these coins will likely depend on a mix of continued collector demand, general interest in tangible assets, and the cultural persistence of coin collecting itself. As long as people are drawn to the tactile beauty of coins, to their history and their stories, there will be a market for them, and the 1978 penny will remain part of that conversation. Now imagine a scenario for a modern collector. You find a 1978 penny in exceptional condition, perhaps in an old mint set or in change. You send it off for grading, and it comes back as MS67 red. Instantly its value leaps from a cent to several $100s if lightning strikes and it grades MS68 red. You are suddenly holding a coin that could attract bids well into the thousands. You might choose to sell immediately or hold it as an investment, betting that scarcity will drive prices higher in the coming years, or you might simply keep it as a prized part of your collection, deriving satisfaction from knowing you possess one of the finest survivors of a coin struck in the billions. In either case, the journey from pocket change to coveted collectible underscores the strange alchemy of numismatics, where history, art, scarcity, and human desire combine to turn base metal into something far more valuable, and when we aggregate the top coins from this date in the hands of thousands of collectors worldwide, we edge closer to that grand total market value in the hundreds of millions. The number is not just a sum of prices, but a testament to the depth of engagement and emotional investment in these small copper discs that still circulate quietly among us. Sliding directly into Part 7, letting the flow keep expanding without any headings or captions or subtitles, continuing the story of the 1978 1-cent coin and delving deeper into the microscopic world that often determines whether a coin is worth a single cent or thousands. When you take a coin in hand, especially a common one like a 1978 penny, and look at it with the naked eye, it can appear flawless, smooth fields, no obvious scratches, lettering clean but under magnification, and entirely different landscape emerges. The fields reveal hairline scratches from contact with other coins, tiny nicks from counting machines, minuscule spots where copper has reacted with moisture, forming faint discolorations. What the collector's unaided eye might call perfect, the grading services trained professional sees as nearly but not quite gem condition. This is why so few coins ever make the leap into MS68 territory, because even a pinpoint mark in the wrong place can cap the grade at MS67. For the 1978 penny, the finest known examples are often studied in great detail with microscopic photographs taken to document their dye state. That term refers to the exact condition of the dye that struck the coin. A fresh dye leaves sharp, crisp details, no flow lines, no dye cracks as it wears from repeated use. The metal flows differently, tiny cracks may develop or devices may lose their definition. Collectors who specialize in this date and mint mark can sometimes identify which dye a particular high grade coin came from and trace it to other coins struck by the same tool. This kind of detective work creates a map of the minting process invisible to most people and adds a layer of narrative to each coin. A top example might be described not only by its grade but by its dye marriage and markers. Perhaps this specimen shows an early dye state obverse with strong hair detail on Lincoln and a reverse where the steps of the memorial are fully defined without the blurring that comes later, or it might exhibit a faint dye clash where elements of the reverse design have been lightly impressed into the obverse from dyes striking without a planchet between them, creating ghost images. For those outside the hobby, such nuances may seem esoteric, but for the dedicated collector they are part of the romance of coin hunting. Each mark tells a story, each anomaly hints at a moment in the mint's mechanical ballet. Beyond the world of perfect business strikes and proofs lies the fascinating arena of environmental storage and how it affects coins over decades. The copper of a 1978 penny is reactive, and if stored in damp basements, humid attics, or fluctuating temperatures, it will change. Toning can range from subtle golds and reds to deep blues and purples, or to unattractive splotchy browns and blacks. Sometimes a naturally toned coin with attractive symmetrical colors can actually command a premium because the toning is stable and aesthetically pleasing, but more often environmental effects lower a coin's desirability, especially for those chasing the highest registry grades. This is why coins stored in original mint packaging in climate-controlled conditions tend to fare best over time. The reality, though, is that in 1978, almost no one was thinking about long-term preservation of everyday cents. Coins were tossed into change jars, kept in desk drawers, rattled around in glove compartments. Each of those casual storage methods added microscopic wear or contamination that only becomes apparent decades later. In the present day, there are famous known specimens of the 1978 penny that stand out not just for their grade but for their provenance. Coins that were part of famous registry sets, coins that sold for record amounts at major auctions, coins that appeared in numismatic magazines and became minor celebrities within the collecting world. A particularly clean MS68 red from the Denver Mint might have once graced the display case at a major coin show, drawing small crowds who wanted to see in person just how flawless a common date cent could look. Such coins are often regraded multiple times over the years as grading standards subtly shift, or as owners hope to eke out another point of grade to boost the coin's market value. When these coins trade hands, the sale often includes detailed documentation of their history, adding yet another layer of desirability for serious buyers. There is also the treasure hunt angle that makes the 1978 penny so appealing. For content like a YouTube video, you can weave real stories of people finding high-grade coins in unexpected places. Imagine a retiree clearing out boxes in the attic and finding a forgotten roll of bank-wrapped pennies from 1978 untouched since the year of issue. The roll is opened, each coin is a blazing red time capsule. One is sent for grading, and comes back at MS-68 red. Suddenly that attic clean-out turns into a multi-$1,000 payday. Or imagine a metal detector hobbyist scanning the soil near an old schoolyard finding a 1978 penny with surprising luster. The context of its loss, a child's dropped lunch money perhaps decades ago, now transformed into a tiny relic with an outsized story. These scenarios capture the emotional core of why people keep searching, because the idea that a rare and valuable coin could be hiding in plain sight fuels both the collector's persistence and the broader fascination of casual audiences. The 1978 penny sits in a perfect sweet spot for this kind of storytelling. Common enough to be familiar, old enough to have nostalgia, and change in composition just around the corner, giving it a sense of being from the end of an era. And when you start multiplying the highest known values across every top-graded specimen-proof coin, dramatic mint error, and sentimental private collection, you can begin to believe that in aggregate they could collectively account for hundreds of millions in value, each coin a small copper tile in a massive mosaic of history, commerce, and personal stories. Rolling straight into Part 8, keeping the language as a single flowing narrative with no headings or captions or subtitles, and allowing the story of the 1978 1-cent coin to spill outward into a broader landscape of coinage history and speculative futures. The late 1970s were not just a turning point for the United States cent but for copper coinage worldwide. Commodity prices were rising due to global demand, inflationary pressures, and shifting trade patterns in many countries. The cost of producing small denomination coins began to creep uncomfortably close to or even exceed their face value. Governments from Canada to Australia to several European nations quietly commissioned studies on alternative metals or even the removal of low-value coins altogether. The United States was no different, but because of the deep cultural embeddedness of the penny and its iconic Lincoln obverse, there was far more resistance to change than might be assumed. In 1978, most Americans simply took for granted that pennies would always be copper and always be there. The notion that in just a few years the composition would shift to copper-plated zinc would have seemed almost unthinkable, yet the economic logic was inevitable, and if you trace the lineage of copper coins across the world, you can see the pattern repeated over and over again: rising metal prices forcing change, smaller coins being phased out or replaced with cheaper alloys. The 1978 penny thus becomes a kind of last hurrah for a composition that had been stable since 1909, and the deeper you go into the collector's psyche, the more you realize that part of its charm is tied to that sense of finality. When projecting forward to the year 2078, one can imagine the cent itself having perhaps been discontinued decades earlier or retained only as a commemorative token for collectors. If it survives in daily commerce at all, it will almost certainly be made of some ultralight, inexpensive material, or perhaps a biopolymer designed to withstand circulation without oxidizing. In such a world, the 1978 copper cent would be an antique, an artifact from an era when coins were made of honest metal and designed to last generations. Its value in 2078 could easily eclipse anything we see now, not because the melt value of copper will be extraordinary, but because the cultural and historical distance will magnify its desirability. A coin that today might fetch a few thousand in top grade could in a century command 6 or even 7 figures in real purchasing power, especially if collecting traditions remain strong and registry set competitions still exist with digitized grading records and ownership histories. By then the coin could be tracked like a famous artwork with an unbroken chain of provenance, each owner adding a new chapter to its life. In the present day, auctions serve as our preview of that future. Every time a 1978 penny in MS-68 red comes to market, we witness a microdrama of anticipation, bidding strategy, and final triumph for the winning bidder. Major auction houses understand the psychology involved. They will photograph the coin under perfect lighting, sometimes even produce short promotional videos showing the coin rotating in 360 degrees so bidders can appreciate its full visual impact. The marketing is almost cinematic, and for certain coins the hype builds in advance of the sale, generating social media buzz among collectors and even casual investors who see it as an opportunity to park money in a tangible asset. The record prices that emerge from these events feed directly into market confidence, and once a coin has achieved a certain price point, it rarely falls far below it in subsequent sales unless the overall economic climate shifts dramatically. There is also the factor of extraordinary mint errors, which in 1978 were not as aggressively culled by quality control as they are today. Coins with off-center strikes, broad strikes, double dies, or wrong planchet errors can elevate a humble cent into a headline-making collectible. A dramatic double-die obverse with noticeable spread on the date or lettering can be worth hundreds or thousands of times its face value, particularly if combined with strong luster and minimal wear-off metal errors such as a 1978 cent struck on a dime planchet or a foreign coin blank are even more spectacular because they combine rarity with a clear visual oddity that instantly catches the eye among error collectors. These pieces can command fierce bidding wars because they represent anomalies that simply should not exist yet somehow slipped into circulation and survived the decades undetected until some sharp-eyed individual plucked them from change or from a dealer's junk bin for pennies on the dollar. The thrill of those discoveries keeps the mythos of the 1978 penny alive beyond its basic mintage numbers and composition. It is a reminder that in the churn of billions of strikes there is always the possibility of something unusual slipping through the machinery of mass production. On a more intimate level, the coin has a quiet emotional resonance for many people born or married or graduating in 1978 who will seek out a penny from that year as a keepsake. Often these personal quests intersect with the larger numismatic market when an individual intent on finding the perfect birth year coin suddenly learns about the grading scale, the difference between red and brown coins, and the price gulf between MS65 and MS68. What began as a sentimental purchase can quickly escalate into a serious collecting endeavor, adding more buyers to the top of the market and driving demand higher even in less than perfect grades. The 1978 penny maintains a steady baseline of collector interest because it marks a moment in history, and it still turns up in circulation enough to keep it in the public eye for YouTube audiences. This combination of rarity at the top, sentimental appeal for the year, and the tantalizing possibility of finding a valuable error coin creates fertile ground for storytelling because you can weave together global economic history, minting technology, personal nostalgia, and treasure hunt excitement into one long flowing narrative that keeps the viewer hooked as they imagine both the immense market today and the even larger possibilities for tomorrow. Continuing into Part 9 without breaking the flow into headings, captions, or subtitles, and diving further into the living stories behind the 1978 1-cent coin and the people who have elevated it from a piece of small change into a high-stakes collectible, there is a peculiar intimacy in the way a coin passes from hand to hand over decades. Most of the 1978 pennies struck were spent almost immediately moving through shops and pockets without anyone giving them a second thought. A child might have dropped one into a vending machine for a soda in the summer of that year. An office worker might have fished one from a change tray at the bus station. A farmer could have carried it in his overalls to buy seeds at the feed store. These moments were invisible to the people living them, yet each one is part of the chain of custody that determines whether a coin survives in pristine condition or is worn down to anonymity. The few coins that remained untouched often owe their survival to accidents of storage. A teller at a small-town bank setting aside a fresh roll because the wrapper color caught her eye. A grandfather slipping an uncirculated penny into a cigar box with a note to his grandson. A collector at the time hoarding entire boxes of mint-sealed rolls as a hedge against inflation, not knowing that 40 or 50 years later 1 or 2 coins from those rolls might be worth far more than the rest combined. In recent years, certain collectors have made headlines for paying extraordinary sums for these top-tier examples. These individuals are often private people, but occasionally their purchases become public through major auction houses or collector forums. A notable case involved a buyer who had been assembling what he hoped would be the highest-ranked registry set of Lincoln cents in existence. When a 1978 Denver Mint cent graded MS68 red came up for auction, he made the decision to push past his original budget and outbid every rival. The final price was staggering, not just for that date, but for any modern cent. Yet for him it was worth it because it secured a key piece in a competitive landscape where ownership of even one record-holding coin can cement a collector's reputation for decades. These stories ripple through the hobby, inspiring others to look more closely at the coins in their possession and sparking renewed interest in hunting bank boxes or attending coin shows in the hope of finding a sleeper coin with hidden potential. The role of grading services in shaping these outcomes cannot be overstated. Before the widespread adoption of third-party grading and encapsulation, values for coins like the 1978 penny were far more subjective. A dealer's description of gem uncirculated might mean one thing to him and another to the buyer. Disputes over grade and value were common. The introduction of standardized grading scales, sealed tamper-proof holders, and population reports transformed the market. Suddenly a coin could be precisely compared to others of Its date and mint mark, and buyers could see exactly how many existed at each grade level for the 1978 penny. The population of MS68 Reds remains vanishingly small, which is why each appearance in the marketplace generates such intense competition and price movement. This transparency also helps fuel the narrative of the $555 million collective market value, because it allows analysts to aggregate sales figures across decades and track appreciation over time. The coins themselves often become minor celebrities within the hobby. When a particularly famous specimen changes hands, collectors and dealers alike remember it by its certification number or unique visual markers like a tiny toning spot or a die scratch on the memorial steps. These identifiers give the coin a personality, almost like a racing horse with a decorated career in circulation. There is another class of 1978 penny that draws attention not for perfection but for uniqueness: the heavily circulated coins that bear the marks of their journeys, each scratch, each dent, each area of uneven color, a record of thousands of transactions. Some have been bent from use in slot machines, others carry stains from having been buried in soil for years or submerged in water. Yet even these worn coins can hold sentimental value, especially when tied to personal milestones. Someone might still carry the penny they received on the day they met their spouse, or the last coin given to them by a grandparent, and while such pieces have no monetary premium in the numismatic market, they remain priceless in a private sense. The human connection to coins is layered. There is the investor's view, the historian's view, the artist's view, and the ordinary person's view, all intersecting in the same object. This is part of why the story of the 1978 cent is so enduring, because it is not simply about metal weight or mintage numbers, but about all these perspectives woven together across time and geography. The coin is as much a witness as it is an artifact. And the more we explore its history, the more it becomes clear that its value, whether measured in cents or millions, rests on the countless lives it has touched. Continuing seamlessly into Part 10 and bringing the narrative to a close without captions, headings, or subtitles, letting the final stretch draw together the threads of history, value, human connection, and future potential of the 1978 1-cent coin. There is a certain electricity in stories of rediscovery, coins thought lost to time emerging from unexpected places. A man in rural Ohio opens an old wooden drawer in a workbench inherited from his father, and inside, under layers of dusty screws and paper clips, sits a small brown paper roll marked 1978 in faded pencil. When he breaks it open, the coins inside glow with untouched copper luster. A woman in California buys a box of vintage postcards at a flea market, and hidden at the bottom is a coin envelope labeled Lucky Penny, sealed since the year of issue. The penny inside later grades MS68 red and sells for more than a luxury car. A retired schoolteacher in Maine donates a jar of coins to a local charity auction, and a sharp-eyed volunteer spots an unusually sharp 1978 Lincoln cent amid the mix, sends it to a grading service, and sees it come back at a grade that stuns the local coin club. These are not urban legends, but the kinds of small miracles that happen when billions of coins circulate for decades, with the possibility of a few rare survivors hiding among them. The global collecting community plays a quiet but decisive role in magnifying the value of these finds. Collectors in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East have long been interested in American coinage, not just for its designs but for the stability of the U.S. numismatic market as an investment vehicle. For some, a high-grade 1978 penny is not just a collectible but a piece of cultural and economic history, a portable store of value and prestige. When major auctions are held in New York, Hong Kong, or London, it is not uncommon for serious buyers to participate from multiple continents, either in person or via live online bidding. Each win reverberates across the market, with the sale price becoming a new benchmark, and every time a record is set, it nudges the perception of what is possible higher. Still, part of what keeps this energy alive is the psychological trigger built into the humble penny's identity. Anyone can own one, anyone can find one in change, anyone can search for one in an attic or roll from the bank. This accessibility blurs the line between casual curiosity and serious investment, and when a person hears of a coin worth thousands or even millions, it ignites the thought that they too might stumble upon such a treasure in their own possession. The 1978 cent embodies that daydream perfectly, because it is young enough that examples still circulate, yet old enough that high-grade survivors are rare enough to be valuable, and it sits at the end of an era before the composition changed, giving it historical gravity. In the end, the $555 million collective market figure is more than a tally of auction results and private sales. It is a testament to the combined power of history, nostalgia, rarity, art, investment, and the simple joy of discovery. It is the sum of every collector's decision to preserve a coin, every moment of care taken to store it properly, every bid placed in an auction, every whispered story about a lucky find. It is also a reminder that value is never just about metal content or age, but about the meaning people attach to an object across generations. The 1978 penny may have been born in a year of economic shifts and global change, but its journey since then has transformed it into something much greater than the sum of its copper and design. It has become a shared narrative, a small artifact that connects strangers across time and geography, a symbol that even the most ordinary seeming thing can hide extraordinary potential. And as long as people keep looking, keep telling its story, and keep believing that the next great find could be in the palm of their hand, the legend of the 1978 1-cent coin will continue to grow until it occupies not just the cabinets of elite collectors but the imaginations of anyone who has ever held a penny and wondered what if.